across the nation and in our homes. So we are going to introduce our panelists. Our host is Congressman Bobby Scott. We also have our Norfolk Commonwealth attorney, Ramin Fatehi. We have Monica Sarmiento, who is the executive director of the Virginia Coalition for Immigrant Rights. And we also have Nina Patel, who is with the American Civil Liberties Union, and attorney Rebecca Winn. Before we start, and I'm going to open it up with Congressman Scott, open up remarks, I do want to recognize that we have our Vice Mayor, Stephen Brown, with us. We also have the Newport News Mayor, Philip Jones. And also the Newport News Commonwealth Attorney, Shannon Jones. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Congressman Scott.
Thank you. Do we miss any elected officials? Thank you.
Yes. Tanya Basine, School Board of Norfolk.
Tanya, good to see you. Thank you. Good to see you. Anybody else? Appreciate it. Thank you for joining us today in this very important Know Your Rights panel, and I'm thankful to be joined by a panel of experts who will be guiding us through the discussion. I'm also glad to be joined by Galen Knoyden, the president of the Hampton NAACP, who will moderate the panel discussion. Today, we'll go over individuals' rights when interacting with law enforcement officials. This will ensure that we're all aware of our constitutional rights and will make it easier for everyone to identify any abusive tactics in our community. But first of all, I have a video that I'd like everyone to watch.
Do I click it? You got it, okay.
There were 3,000 ICE and Border Patrol agents in the Minneapolis area, the largest ever deployment federal.
There we go.
There were 3,000 ICE and Border Patrol agents in the Minneapolis area, the largest ever deployment of federal immigration officers to an American city.
This isn't policing and law enforcement as I practiced it for 25 years.
We cannot let people in our communities think that our local law enforcement is okay with the actions that we simply know are not just only wrong, but illegal.
For the last 2 weeks, he has been receiving endless complaints about civil rights violations from the U.S. citizens.
You're trying to say that's what it's made, that's why I'm.
Oh, then you go back. Folks, that's bushly policing.
5-year-old Liam Roman taken by an ICE agent after getting home from preschool.
American citizens are being grabbed or stopped or seized. This can't happen. People's civil rights have to be the cornerstone of everything we do.
All these tensions have been building. I'm afraid we're going to have another moment. We're all exposed.
That video gives you a sense of what we're dealing with right now. President Trump told the American people that his enhanced immigration enforcement would focus on violent felons who are in the country unlawfully. And this is not true as we gather in the wake of heartbreaking events that unfolded in Minneapolis and across our country involving Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, and other federal agents. In recent weeks, 2 American citizens in Minneapolis, Renee Good, a mother, community member, and Alex Pretti, an ICU nurse and Veterans Affairs healthcare worker, were shot and killed during encounters involving federal immigration agents. Americans have witnessed these events through video and eyewitness accounts through multiple angles. And then the President and Secretary of Homeland Security told stories that, as we say, were inconsistent with the video evidence. The President and Secretary called Ms. Good and Mr. Pretti domestic terrorists. These tragedies demand answers, accountability, and reform. And it's taken 3 months of protests and deaths of American citizens for ICE and the CPB to even begin reducing their surge in Minneapolis. But those 2 deaths don't stand alone. Across the country in 2025 and in this year, multiple individuals have died in connection with federal immigration enforcement, some during field operations, others while in federal custody. In addition, community advocates and civil rights organizations have raised alarms about other deaths reportedly linked to immigration enforcement. Some of these cases are still under investigation, and the full facts have yet to be publicly confirmed, but the pattern is unmistakable. Too many lives are being lost in a system that lacks sufficient transparency, restraint, and accountability. Enforcement of our immigration laws in a way that protects public safety and human dignity is unlawful. Enforcing our immigration laws in a way that protects public safety and human dignity is not only lawful, but necessary. And we must never confuse accountability with aggression, enforcement with impunity, or power with license to harm people. And federal authority is exercised without restraint, without clear oversight, without respect for constitutional rights. It erodes the very foundations of trust and safety in our communities. I've joined with my colleagues in Congress to press for transparency and accountability for these actions. I've called for rigorous oversight for ICE and Department of Homeland Security, including independent investigations into these fatal encounters and full cooperation with state and local authorities. We've had demands for changes, which would include very modest demands: stop deporting United States citizens, obtain a warrant before entering a house without permission, just like every other law enforcement agency, have and abide by a policy prohibiting excessive force, just like all other police, stop profiling and using dragnet, where you just go into a community and pick up anybody and stop anybody that fits the profile. Require police to have ID and not masked, and have uniforms that aren't paramilitary, just like all other law enforcement. Have body cameras, just like just about all other law enforcement, and not exercise this police power in sensitive locations like courts, schools, places of worship, and polling places. Regrettably, none of these demands have been the Republicans have rejected these demands and have temporarily shut down the Department of Homeland Security. Hopefully it'll be short. Leader Jeffries has guaranteed to the TSA agents in the department that we will have nothing to do with any of their loss of a paycheck. So hopefully we'll open up pretty soon, but this modest list of demands being rejected is certainly regrettable. I've also co-sponsored the Stop Excessive Force and Immigration Act, which would reform use of force tactics used by ICE to ensure greater transparency and strengthening training requirements. Overzealous law enforcement officers need to know that they will be prosecuted for illegal activities. This is why I've also co-sponsored the Bivens Act of 2025, which will allow individuals to sue federal officials for violations of their constitutional rights, just like you can sue state officials, state police, for violation of constitutional rights. Additionally, I'm calling for the resignation of the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, and have co-sponsored an impeachment resolution against the Secretary. Her behavior has just been simply unacceptable. The fact that she is willing to publicly misrepresent what occurred in the cases of Renee Good and Alex Pretti before any independent investigation took place, and to have her comments so contrary to the video evidence just means that she's lost all, should have lost all confidence and should be removed. The families and communities deserve answers. Justice demands accountability, and it's important that we all know our rights when we are seeing cities taken over by ICE and people who are arrested and detained, particularly legal permanent residents, even in churches, homes, and workplaces without valid warrants, and having ICE assaulting and even killing citizens. And this is why we're here today. So we have, like the panel has been introduced, and I want to first start with the Commonwealth's attorney from Norfolk, member of an important newly formed organization, Ramin Fatehi.
Thank you, Congressman Scott, for convening this important conversation. Thank you to my fellow panel members. Each of us is working in our spheres to stand up for our values as Americans, to protect our rights, and to acknowledge that what the federal government is doing is deeply wrong, illegal, and immoral. My work as the Chief Minister of Justice in Norfolk is both important and limited, but one that carries a great deal of weight. And in a world where people talk a lot about deterring criminal behavior in situations where it actually doesn't work, there is some value in deterring the potentially criminal behavior of our federal agents. We live in a federal system. We all remember that from middle school civics. What that means is that the federal government has certain powers and has powers that are superior to the state governments. But under the 10th Amendment, the state governments have whatever powers the federal government has not already taken for itself. And that includes what's known as the police power, the basic power to criminalize behavior, to charge people, to try them and convict them. That said, those powers have been restricted over time, and understandably so. And they are designed specifically to protect federal law enforcement officers and to make it difficult for people in state government to prosecute federal law enforcement officers. In a world where the normal laws of political gravity apply, that makes sense. Nobody wanted Bull Connor arresting FBI agents and throwing them into kangaroo court in Alabama for enforcing civil rights laws. That's not what we wanted. And the legal framework that exists today is the legal framework that was created during Reconstruction and the Civil Rights era. That makes it difficult, but not impossible for us to do our job. There are roughly 2,300 people who occupy an office similar to mine in the United States, elected prosecutors. 9 of us have come together over the course of the last few weeks and have formed a group called the Project to Fight Against Federal Overreach. FAFO is our acronym, and arguably that's our charge to folks who want to come into our cities. The charter members include the district attorneys in Minneapolis and Philadelphia, 2 of my colleagues from Texas, and notably 4 Virginians, including me. We stated something that I think is arguably should just be the obvious, which is that federal agents are not above the law any more than local cops are, or prosecutors are, or elected officials or private citizens are. Despite what we see in the federal system and a perversion and corruption of justice and the handing out of pardons like candy, we have one system of laws, at least here in Norfolk and in Virginia. And that we and I, as the chief prosecutor of the city, if a federal law enforcement officer came into Norfolk and did what we saw on camera federal law enforcement officers do in Minneapolis, that I would be opening a criminal investigation with the intent to indict and to go to trial and to convict. And this is not easy. The 9 of us who formed this organization met approximately 10 days ago in Washington to discuss what we would do. And we, first of all, met for most of the day with some of the top criminal civil rights litigators in the United States, former members of the Justice Department, including the lead prosecutor on the Tree of Life Synagogue case from Pittsburgh, one of the lead trial and the lead appellate lawyer for the Derek Chauvin federal prosecution from Minneapolis. And we got an all-day crash course in the law and in how we would essentially have to be pulled out of our own courtrooms and up into federal court to try these cases, and then how to contest the claims of federal immunity that are very strong but not impossible to defeat. We also developed action plans, because some of which you've seen unfold in Minneapolis, which include efforts to have pleadings ready, documents ready for a race to the courthouse to enjoin the federal government, to block the federal government from despoiling evidence, from abandoning crime scenes so that we could take over that evidence. We have also agreed to pool resources. We are looking to raise money that will go into a common, you want to call it a legal defense fund. It's not money that any one of us will touch unless and until we need to hire specialists who will be able to go to court and litigate against the full force of the United States Department of Justice to ensure that we are able to go to trial. We are prepared to do all of these things, and we are also prepared both to expand our circle beyond the initial 9 for people who share our values. And I've had conversations with folks in Virginia about this, and to offer those resources even to arch conservatives, people who do not share our values, but who do believe in holding federal officials accountable. This matters because we believe in doing the right thing. It also matters because President Trump can't pardon people for state crimes. You can't do it. So nobody thought we'd live in a world where states' rights was the call of people protecting civil rights. We are not living in a normal universe, but that is where we are. And if we as humble local prosecutors have to be the guardians of democracy, we are going to do it. So that is what we are going to work on. We also have called for Congress to take actions very much along the lines of what Congressman Scott has been advocating for. But we're hoping that the end result in places like Norfolk and Portsmouth and Fairfax County is that if we lay down a marker, that you'll never need to use us. So the law firms folded until Mark Elias and Perkins Coie started standing up. So the colleges and universities folded till Harvard stood up. And law enforcement has, some have worked very valiantly, some have gone missing in action. And we're hoping that by standing up, we'll get other people to stand with us and that we'll force a changing course at the federal level.
Thank you. Nina Patel from the ACLU.
Good evening. My name is Nina Patel. I'm Senior Policy Counsel at the American Civil Liberties Union, one of the oldest civil liberties organizations here in the United States. We work in the courtrooms, we work in state houses, and we work in Congress to protect civil liberties. And I want to thank Congressman Scott, not just for his extremely valuable work in Congress, but for inviting me here today. I'm very thrilled to be joined by Rebecca Winn, by Ramin Fatehi and Monica Sarmiento, who I've met on numerous occasions. I'm going to offer some practical advice and also some of a larger view of what's kind of happening in our society and our culture. If you viewed the news reports, the videos, and the scenes in Minneapolis, and you felt scared for our country, if you had that feeling, if you felt nervous, then I want to thank you for coming tonight, because our civil liberties are at stake. In this moment, if we were hoping that it would be a different generation or previous generation or maybe the next generation, it is here. What we are talking about and what's at consequence in this moment are our constitutional rights. Now, the immigrant community is being targeted. I think we all understand that from this administration. I think we understand what we're seeing. But there are steps each and every one of us can take, because what we saw in Minneapolis is an absence of the rule of law. And if we want to live in a society where we have the rule of law, then there are concrete steps that every one of us has to take. And if you feel nervous about that, that's all right. We're going to do it together, all right? Because this is our country. This is our Constitution. And let me tell you something about that document. It is inconvenient for people who want to rule by force, who want to rule by fear. So I'm going to start with something that you probably all have either in front of you or in your pocket. If you have biometric identification on your phone, and this is a tip from the ACLU from me to you tonight, If your phone identifies you by your face or your fingerprint, go ahead and change that setting before you leave here tonight. Use your technology, but understand that it is also a very powerful tool for surveillance and an invasion of privacy. And in this moment, it can be a tool for us, but I want to make sure that all of you have some practical advice here tonight. If you are out and you witness activity by federal agents or law enforcement that you believe is unlawful, your First Amendment right, all of our First Amendment rights allow us to film that, but I want you to do it safely, right? That doesn't mean you have to be 20 feet away. You just cannot be in the zone of action. You need to do so on public property. There are different rules for private property. On private property, the owners of private property can set the rules. Now, if that property is your private property, as we have seen in Minneapolis, many individuals are having their homes invaded, then you may film, all right? So I want to make sure that you understand those key features. If you are out protesting, if you are standing with neighbors, or if you are standing with community, if you find yourself at a peaceful protest, you also can film, all right? And that's a really important feature. If you are stopped by law enforcement, you have the right to remain silent. And I want you to remember that, all right? You can say, I am choosing to remain silent. If you are arrested, you should continue to remain silent. The other thing that you should do is, in this moment in which fear is at a premium, it is important to have a plan. If you know the number of an attorney or the ACLU of Virginia, keep that number on you. In this environment, it's important to have a plan to act calmly, right? Don't escalate a situation. I want to zoom out for a little bit and talk about what's going on in Washington, D.C. Right now, the congressman is absolutely correct. The Bivens Act is an important piece of legislation. I'd like to thank the congressman for co-sponsoring it. As constituents, as voters, as people in your communities, organizing, voting, and calling your congressperson, asking friends and relatives to do that is important in this moment. Together on the ground, by exercising our First Amendment rights, by holding witness, we form an important safeguard, a firewall for accountability against illegal federal action. By having local prosecutors, such as Ramin Fatehi, who are committed to the rule of law, we strengthen our local communities. By calling in and taking action, and action works in Congress. By writing, visiting, and coming to Washington, D.C., your voice matters immensely to your congressperson in the Senate and the House. That's a critical function. Holding law enforcement, especially federal law enforcement, accountable in this moment is going to require all of us.
Thank you. I just noticed Alex Frazier in the back representing Senator Kane. Thank you. Monica Sarmiento from the Virginia Coalition of Immigrant Rights.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's such an honor to be here with all of you tonight. I know over the last few months, we have really sat in anguish as not only what we witnessed happening across the country, but also what we saw happening in our Commonwealth. In less than a year, our Commonwealth went from having 0 ICE agreements with local law enforcement to having 22. And actually, that's a reduction because we had actually started at 31, but Governor Spanberger just signed an executive order relinquishing the state agencies from their ICE agreements. So we are off to a good start, but there are still so many more pieces that we need to move forward in order to go ahead and make sure that we're protecting our immigrant communities, but also our local law enforcement. When I think of local law enforcement, we're seeing folks who have entered into this field as protectors of the community. And what we're seeing coming out of the federal agencies is really a twisting and manipulation of local law enforcement and an overreach and a constant violation of ICE agents just trampling over the Constitution. And so what we want to see is a lot more activity from the community as we are currently in the midst of trying to pass a number of pieces of legislation in the General Assembly that will put our communities in a protected status, but also law enforcement. So I'm happy to say that so far we have had a number of bills pass the House of Delegates and the State Senate. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the ones in the House of Delegates. So we've had 3 really critical bills pass in the House. The first one being House Bill 650, which is carried by Delegate Carlson. And this bill, what it does is requires warrants for protected spaces, particularly when it comes to courthouses. What we've seen all over the Commonwealth is ICE just show up at courthouses, enter as they will, and racially profile individuals, and then proceed to arrest individuals who have not committed a crime, who have shown up trying to do their due diligence, trying to be good stewards, and process them for deportation. So we're really excited to see this bill move forward. It also has a Senate version accompanying it that is carried by Senator Salim, who's carrying all of the Senate bills. And that is Senate Bill 351. And so the following bill is actually another bill that actually requires law enforcement to no longer be masked. And I think we have heard stories from all over the Commonwealth. Just not too long ago, I heard a story regarding folks in a white van in the Eastern Shore picking up immigrants all across the Commonwealth, and how terrifying it is to have someone approaching you who does not have any sort of identifying markers, fully masked, demanding to know information. We've seen the videos play out. So on the Senate side, that is SB 352. And on the House side, that is House Bill 1482. On the House side, that is carried by Delegate Schmidt. And on the Senate side, it's once again carried by Senator Salim. And kind of coming back to now the larger piece of legislation that we've been working very, very hard on that has many moving pieces, and that is a securities piece of legislation both on the House and the Senate side. On the House side, it is carried by Delegate Alfonso Lopez, and that is House Bill 1441. And really demands that in order for any locality to enter what's called a 287G agreement and a number of other types of ICE agreements, ICE would be required to marry a whole list of things, including making sure they're following constitutional rights, putting the threshold very, very high to really disincentivize local law enforcement from acting with partners who are not following the law. Similar on the Senate side, this bill actually just passed today on the Senate floor early this morning, and that is SB 783 that is also carried by Senator Salim. So currently we are heading towards crossover, which is when one chamber sends their bills to the other chamber and vice versa. And so we are still going to have several steps ahead, and we might actually even need a few amendments to make sure that we are being as encompassing as possible to really get all of the different kinds of ICE agreements that there are, because there are many different kinds of ICE agreements. Many of you have heard, I think, of the 287G agreement that deputizes local law enforcement, but there's also detainer agreements. We learned not too long ago that Chesapeake still has a detainer agreement, and it seems most of the folks that they have been detaining are not violent offenders. Shock, right? We've seen this play out so often. The Cato Institute did a national study that showed nearly 70% of all those detained are not committing these kind of serious crimes that President Trump said he was only going to be going after these hardened criminals. We're just not seeing that. We're seeing people who genuinely want to make a good effort, pay their taxes, and just live a peaceful life. But we need your help. We need your help and your advocacy, your emails, not only continue to making sure that these bills pass the opposite chamber, but also making sure that the governor stands in unison to make sure that we ban all of these ICE agreements until, we're able to see good partners on the federal side. We want to go ahead and see both our immigrant communities and law enforcement protected, to make sure that we're able to go ahead and stand by both those communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca Winn, attorney.
Hi there, everybody. Thank you all for joining us this evening. And thank you so much, Congressman Scott and Ms. Knoyton, for having us here today. You've probably seen a lot of coverage on the news. You probably wonder, what can you do now? I know, I too share those feelings of hopelessness. So I wear many hats in the community, one of which is I'm a private practice attorney. When people come to me, they usually have something wrong in their life. And they say to me, Rebecca, what can I do? They're scared. They're having to go to an adult that they probably do not otherwise know to have to solve problems for them. And that is a very vulnerable place to find ourselves. Now, I believe that the data shows that 1 in 4 people is either an immigrant themselves or has an immigrant in their family. I'm a daughter of an immigrant. My mother came here as a refugee. So I care about everything we're talking about tonight for my mother, who is a U.S. citizen and has been here for more years than not. And, but I also care about them for myself. Everything we are speaking about here tonight not only can help those who are immigrants, they can help you as U.S. citizens. So when we talk about things like your right to remain silent, your right to counsel, your right to not sign or agree to anything until your attorney gets there. These are rights that we are talking about in the capacity of immigrants, but they're tools for you to know as well. So what can you do now? You've heard a lot of the basics. Think about getting a durable power of attorney. Can I see a show of hands? How many people have a child or a grandchild for whom you take care of at some point during the week? Somebody in your care, perhaps. Think about having a durable power of attorney of some sort. This is especially true if you are an immigrant, but even for those of us who are U.S. citizens, make sure you name the person. If something happens to me and somebody needs to pick up the child from school, name that person in your document. If something happens to me and somebody needs to be able to speak to your child's doctor, name that person in your document. If somebody needs to speak to the school, you can go to the school tomorrow and write people down as your emergency contact. So writing down those emergency contacts at the school, having a durable power of attorney, those are ways you can empower yourself right now. Another thing you can do, we're blessed to have Congressman Scott. I jokingly told somebody the other day that there are 2 people who are omnipresent, Jesus Christ and Bobby Scott. That man is all over the place. There is not another person I know. He can be in DC and in the 757 all at once. Let me tell you, he is a good and dutiful public servant to us. He is here to help us. And you want to know how you can empower yourself today? Immigrant or U.S. citizen, you can go to his website. There are DHS privacy waivers on the website of your elected officials. Bobby Scott will have one, Tim Kaine, Mark Warner. I suggest, if you were my clients, and this is not legal advice, right? But I would suggest printing that off, signing your waiver, putting it somewhere safe, letting people know where it is. So if you are detained, or an immigrant in your life is detained, you have that signed waiver right there, and that will then empower your elected officials to be able to advocate on your behalf. Have that waiver somewhere safe. Again, have a family plan. I know we all have cell phones. I'm old enough that I did not always have a cell phone. It was not until I was a young adult that became a more normalized thing. We used to have to remember everybody's phone numbers. So it's not a heavy lift, but you should probably have 1 or 2 emergency phone numbers memorized. There is the ACLU, there is the NAACP or the NAACP. I'm sorry, NAACP. Have the phone number for a trusted family attorney. That attorney does not practice in the area you need, they'll get you in touch with somebody who does, or make a good faith effort. So try to have phone numbers memorized. I would keep something by your front door, in your car, in your purse, reminding you, stay calm, stay silent, ask for an attorney, have an emergency number or 2 down. And that way it's visible for everybody, because when we are in a situation, it is easy to freeze, to panic, to act with emotion. So right now, before we get in these situations, we are empowered with our own logic to plan ahead of time. So that way we've already put that logical plan in place. It is visible for us. So when the emotions kick in, we have a point to center ourselves on. So those are all ways that you can do something today. And I'm here to support the rest of the panel and answer any questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. On the form that Ms. Winn was talking about is a form, before we can get information from an agency, if you want us to help, we have to sign a consent form because of your confidentiality. They won't give us any information without your permission. So that's what that does out front. And I did look up that no masks bill, because the California version of that was ruled unconstitutional a few weeks ago because it had federal only and not state. This version has state and federal, so it ought to be good. So I was delighted to see that. With that, Aileen, Ms. Connaughton, you want to
Yes,
moderate?
thank you. So I have a question for Ramin. How does your office work with local law enforcement agencies to ensure that they respect the rights of immigrants during ICE operations? And what protocols are in place to prevent racial profiling?
Galen, that's a great question. My office, as with all prosecutors' offices, we work with the police, but they don't work for us and we don't work for them. In theory, we're always working towards a common goal, but we have separate lines of authority. That said, I work extremely closely with Chief Talbot, Mark Talbot, the chief of the Norfolk Police Department, and with the Investigative Bureau in Norfolk. And I can tell you, I don't want to speak for the Norfolk Police, but I can tell you for a fact that they are not part of the group that's falling all over itself to turn Virginia into Minneapolis. They are protectors. They are guardians of the community. They have remained focused on solving violent crime and protecting the rights of all people, including immigrants, including undocumented immigrants. And that in my conversations with members of the Norfolk Police Department, the focus has been on the detrimental effects of ICE overreach on the core law enforcement mission of the Norfolk Police Department and on my core law enforcement and protection mission. The police department is not engaging in any sort of ICE sweeps. If anything, they're trying to push back on victims who are scared to speak to them because they are concerned that they are going to get deported. They have offered reassurances that that's not the case. We have consistently tried to push back on overzealous deportations. Our problem at this point is that we have had serious cases, domestic abusers, child sex abusers who have been kicked out of the country before we could put them in prison, which creates the additional problem of witness intimidation and further victimization abroad. A child in El Salvador does not deserve to be sexually abused any more than a child in the United States. Your mother shouldn't be subject to intimidation simply because she lives abroad. The work that the Norfolk Police Department has done, as I have seen it, has been consistent with the idea that if we are dealing with undocumented immigrants, documented immigrants, or native-born citizens, we want to know who committed the crime and what can we do to make sure that the court process, including witnesses coming to court, can go forward. That's also why the bills that Congressman Scott has supported at the federal level to make places like churches and courthouses off limits, the bills that Monica Sarmiento and her colleagues in the House and the Senate have been advocating for are so important, because the bitter irony of this sort of ICE overreach and the cooperation that certain local law enforcement officers, certain sheriffs in other states, other parts of the country have been doing, is it actually makes it harder to do our jobs and harder to keep us safe. And if we really want a safer city, a safer country, we actually need to embrace immigrants, including undocumented immigrants, so that they're willing to use the justice system.
Just want to ask a quick follow-up question. For the organization that you all formed, the FAFO, are you reaching out to other Commonwealth attorneys to join, or are you just going to keep it at the 10 that you have now?
Oh no, we are interested in two modes of outreach. The group started out as 9 because that was a group, all of us who knew each other very well, and we could move quickly. And the fact that 9 elected officials were able to meet within 10 days of the genesis of an idea was actually kind of unusual. But we are very much interested in expanding the formal membership of the project to fight against federal overreach to other like-minded prosecutors, and with some of whom I've already had discussions. But there will also be the availability of that legal defense fund, if you will, the financial resources to hire federal specialists to fight in federal court. That'll be available to anybody, even people with whom we deeply disagree on other topics. If those folks say, we've got a federal official we need to indict for committing a homicide, and we need the money, we're going to make that available, even if that happens to be the only thing on which we agree with that particular prosecutor.
Thank you. The question I have this next is for Nina. Nina, what specific initiatives is the ACLU currently pursuing to address civil liberties concerns related to immigration enforcement?
Thank you. That's a great question. The American Civil Liberties Union, we have headquarters in New York and in Washington, D.C. So there's a number of strategies that we're pursuing right now, but we also have affiliates in each and every state as well as territory. The ACLU of Virginia is a trusted partner. We work first and foremost, when it comes to this administration and its immigration enforcement, we have a number of lawsuits that are pending. So we have had some important court victories in the courtroom that have put a stop to certain enforcement tactics, that have also established sort of a baseline for collecting information about the stops that we're seeing. So keep in mind, Minneapolis is probably at the forefront of many people's minds, the activity here in the Commonwealth as well, but this is occurring in communities across the country, right? This type of enforcement, and I don't like to use the word enforcement because this type of activity by federal agents that goes well beyond the constitutional limits, it's affecting immigrant communities, it's affecting everyday folks who are going about, their everyday business, right? We're talking about principals at schools, teachers, hospital workers, people at the courthouse conducting regular business. And I'd like everyone to remember too, we are also filing lawsuits on the issue of detention, because if this is how federal agents are acting in public and acting with video cameras on them, it is very alarming and a major concern at the American Civil Liberties Union and across the board about what is happening in detention facilities. There has been in the past, open access to detention facilities for congressional members. And what we are seeing from this administration is repeatedly, again, denial of access to detention facilities. Congressional members, and the congressman can tell you this in much more detail, they have a right to go to these facilities, right? These are federal facilities to inspect, to see the conditions. It is perfectly lawful to do so, right? And the denial of that, the harassment of congressional members, and the fabrication that we are seeing, the misinformation that we are seeing from this administration directly after these incidents is extremely alarming. So from the ACLU, we're both fighting in the courthouses, but we are also working with all of our state affiliates to work in state houses. As Monica Sarmiento detailed, here in Virginia, there are a number of bills moving in state legislatures across the country from January, sometimes for 2 to 3, sometimes for more, 4 months. They are introducing laws. So many states are looking at their own cause of action to hold federal agents accountable. They are scrutinizing these longstanding agreements for detention, these longstanding agreements with regard to, local law enforcement and data. I want to also bring up another important fact for all of us here in the Commonwealth, and I'm a resident here too. This government, this federal government, is looking at our data, right? They are scooping enormous amounts of data at the state level that has been used in the past as a vehicle, as a means to deliver services, health services, aid services, nutrition, education. This particular administration is very interested in your personal data, in the data held by states. And it's important that you're talking to your local representatives about protecting our data, protecting our privacy for these types of uses. So it is a multi-pronged approach. And I think the more that we all educate ourselves about that, right? Student data, our health data, this is a really important feature and one worth tracking. If there's any questions or information, the ACLU has a wonderful website. The ACLU of Virginia also has a wonderful website.
Great,
Can
thank you.
Can I follow up on that? One of the issues in the so-called SAVE Act, which is basically a voter suppression bill, is a requirement that states send to the federal government all of their voter registration information, which is shocking because why do they need it? And, we'll just use your imagination, and that's the problem. Within the detention centers, there's been an increase in the number of deaths occurring in detention centers. Members of Congress have sought to visit these centers, as Nina just said, is our right. 13 of them filed suit when they were denied. The court ruled that they have an absolute right to go in and ruled in their favor. And so they take the court order and they can access federal facilities. Other members of Congress, after that decision, have been denied because they were not part of that lawsuit. As if until you filed a lawsuit to exercise your right as a member of Congress, they're not going to recognize the rights that you have. And that's the kind of stonewalling and covering up that we're dealing with this administration.
Thank you. Monica, we have elections coming up, and what are you seeing from the immigrant community that are citizens that want to go and vote?
So in 2024, the Virginia Coalition for Immigrant Rights, along with VACIR members, League of Women Voters of Virginia, and African Communities Together, sued over an executive order that Governor Youngkin signed that purged voters, and the overwhelming majority of those purged were naturalized citizens. So since 2024, we have been stuck in a cycle that currently, at last count, it's close to 8,000 registered voters are being repeatedly purged from the voter rolls. This is something that we are now openly talking with the newly elected Attorney General Jay Jones, as well as hopefully Governor Spanberger will soon be overturning this executive order. But this has been a consistent issue where we're seeing immigrant communities, naturalized citizens, just attacked from a variety of different places. And this is something that we withstood for a long time under the previous Youngkin administration. And I have to say that the intimidation that we have continually seen from the Trump administration is incredibly aggressive. It was only a few days ago that one of his former senior advisors stated that they're planning on sending ICE to the polls. So we're seeing a lot of intimidation factors. We're hoping to see Virginia move in a new light. Hopefully, we will see that executive order come to an end soon. But it has been incredibly challenging for those who want to do nothing more than do their due diligence and have the ability to be able to go ahead and cast their vote. And at best, be given the opportunity to only cast a provisional ballot. So it is something that we have stood up and fought for. Went up all the way to the Supreme Court when we requested an emergency injunction for the 2024 election, only to have the Supreme Court deny us that emergency injunction. But this is something that, you know, we screamed at the top of our lungs that an attack on naturalized citizens is an attack on citizens. And we need to go ahead and make sure that we are prepared to move forward in the possibility that we can continue to see some additional kind of efforts from the Trump administration where we will have to once again go to court and fight to make sure that citizens are able to go ahead and vote and cast their vote for whomever they like. But more than anything, it has had a chilling effect for folks who thought they could feel comfortable once they were a naturalized citizen. We've seen this effort from the Trump administration that really has transcended every single kind of immigrant there is, regardless whether you have an immigration status or not. I think it has been very evident, the sheer number of racially biased, tactics that we've seen. And so this directly impacts immigrants. And I think back to the election of Mark Herring, Attorney General Mark Herring, who won by a little more than 900 votes. You can imagine nearly 8,000 people purged from the voter roll. That makes an impact on elections. I mean, it wasn't too long ago that we saw here in the Tidewater area the entire House of Delegates flip over one vote on who had the leadership role in the House of Delegates. So every vote is precious, and making sure that we are protecting folks' right to vote is imperative. And we hope to see that the governor will soon remove that executive order so folks can feel confident in being able to re-register to vote and vote in the upcoming elections.
Congressman Scott, I just want to follow up. So President Trump has said that he might send ICE agents to the polling locations. Will he be able to do that?
Will he be able to do it?
Oh, he's been doing it already, right?
Well, you know, I think we have to have courts ready to respond. He will obviously, I mean, if you look at the fact that he sent troops to the cities so that military forces in cities does not look unusual and people get kind of acclimated to it. And the continuous reference to being at the polls, I think we have to recognize that that's a real possibility. I think you have to ask all of the candidates for public office, Democrats and Republicans, put them on record as saying they'll do nothing to upset the upcoming election, so that you don't have all of a sudden some emergency come up and said, oh, we can't have an election. We've had elections during world wars. There's no reason why we can not have an election. And so we have to insist that with all of our candidates, one of the things that happens is we have a lot of checks and balances. And if the people that are supposed to be checking and balancing remain silent, as has been the case most of the last year, and not challenge some of the things going on, he can do some of the things he's doing. We just look at tariffs. Some of us remember a little while ago that NAFTA was a huge congressional vote because it had tariffs in it. Congress had to vote. Now he goes ahead and imposes a tariff, and Congress, as a group, the majority, doesn't say anything. And the Congress in the House pass legislation to say, no, there's no emergency and you can't do this. I don't know what's going to happen in the Senate, but procedurally, he could probably veto the bill. But at least we're speaking up, insisting that tariffs become back to congressional authority. But you said, can he do it? He has made it clear that he'll do anything he can until he's stopped. You've got to use the courts and you've got to use congressional oversight to stop him before he'll continue doing something clearly illegal.
Great, thank you. Rebecca, in your experience, what common
Nina,
misconceptions?
you're gonna have time for audience to.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
gonna ask this last question
Okay.
and I was gonna have audience, yes. Rebecca, in your experiences, what common misconceptions do people have about their rights during ICE interactions and how can these be addressed?
Oftentimes, when we are afraid, our emotions are triggered. And so one of the common misconceptions is that we have to do whatever we are being told. We've fought for our freedoms. It is important that we do not cede ground to the chipping away of those freedoms. So the common misconceptions are that you must abide by everything you are told to do. You are not. Again, not to beat the dead horse here, but remaining silent, asking for an attorney, not signing anything without an attorney. Those are your rights. And no matter what anybody tells you, you have the right to exercise them. Another thing that it's important to know is that you don't have to let anybody in without a judicial warrant signed by a judge. So just because somebody says open up does not mean you have to let them in. One thing that's also important for you to remember is to not grant permission. Do not consent. So if there's no warrant involved and the police do not otherwise have a right to question you or detain you, then they cannot do so without your permission. So you can always say, I do not consent to being searched. I do not consent to, your entry into my home. They have to show that they have a reason to be there and they have a right to that entry. So along with staying silent and asking for your attorney, don't give consent to people if they don't already have it. Just say no.
Oh, if Rebecca is completely correct about this, I do want to give you a little bit of a pessimistic PS to that. If you say, I don't consent to your entering my house and ICE starts to kick in your door, do not fight them, please. Mm-hmm. Do not, if they start getting hands on you, they are men with badges and guns. And you may be morally correct, but if you are dead, then is your moral victory worth it? And Rebecca is correct. Nina is correct. We are here to assert our rights. But at a certain point, we are dealing with people who have the capacity to act in lawless and criminal ways. And what that means is go on the record, say, I am not consenting. If they go hands-on with you, please don't fight them back. I would prefer that you live to refuse to cooperate another day. And I hate to be that guy, but having seen in much less serious circumstances, people stand on their rights and lose the argument by spending a couple of nights in jail before the charges are dismissed. I just don't want that to happen to you. So they are right, but please remember, if men with guns start to force their will upon you, do not put yourself in a position where they kill you. And the only recourse is for me to step in and try to prosecute them on the back end.
Great, thank you. We're going to open it up for questions. Does anyone have questions? Raise your hand. Okay.
Okay. Hi, my name is Evelyn Okoa. And I was wondering, like, outside of just voting and like engaging in civic processes, how as a community can we like help out?
So I would like to say that there are lots and lots of nonprofits that are doing direct services across the community. Here in the Tidewater area, Commonwealth Catholic Charities has been incredibly active in the community. If you go onto our website and you look at who can help, there's a list of free clinics and free legal service providers that are overwhelmed at this moment, particularly the legal service providers of folks who need help on doing everything from filling out paperwork to making sure that they are able to go ahead and prepare and hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. So doing that kind of activity in the community is incredibly helpful at this moment.
Can you give me your website?
Sure. It is virginiaimmigrants.org or BACIR.org.
Could I add, voting is extremely important. We'll have an opportunity to do that on April 21st and 45 days before an early vote on a referendum. So you don't want to miss that opportunity. The other is join organizations. Individuals trying to do something as an individual has an effect and can be very, very helpful, but you're much stronger working together with organizations. So identify some of the organizations, those that are filing lawsuits, those who are organizing protests, and find one or two or three that you like and join them. And so you'll have more of a collective effort.
Can I add that I'm a proud member of the NAACP? Proudly, our Hampton unit is the largest unit in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and we keep our fight righteous. So please, there are plenty of organizations represented by this panel. We do have the ACLU, we have Immigrant interests here, the NAACP. If y'all want to roll your sleeves up, we're here. Join us.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sophia King. I'm a proud employee of the Virginia Peninsula Community College. My question is, does anybody on the panel know how long the training is for the current ICE agents that are on the ground right now?
Not enough. And that's one of the demands that we have, that they actually be trained. I think the training now is about half of what it has traditionally been. And that is one of the serious problems. There's no way you can get sufficient training for what they're trying to do with the time they've got.
From my understanding, it's 47 days.
And I heard the same thing.
Mhm.
I'm just trying to confirm.
Yeah, from my
Well,
understanding.
it's about half of what it has traditionally been. They've cut it in half.
It's previously been much longer, but also, the recruitment standards have dropped precipitously, right? They used to screen for quite a few things and it was more of a competitive process. Bonuses have been offered and maybe rescinded, but it is a serious issue. Thank you for raising it.
Prior to the Trump administration, the FBI training course was roughly 32 weeks. And within the last few months, that's also been cut in half to 16 weeks. So even blue chip federal law enforcement organizations are seeing an exodus of principled and experienced people, and they are being replaced by people who either have the wrong values because the training standards have fallen, or the areas of recruitment have strayed into white nationalism. And we have the problem that even the people who come in with the right heart are not getting the training that they need. So this is a problem. And the Justice Department itself has lost over 1,200 lawyers in the last year, and the lawyers who are coming in to replace them don't know what they're doing either. This is a much more profound problem beyond just ICE's lack of training and lack of standards for hiring.
My name's Bobby Zimmer, and I'm glad you brought up about the April 21st vote. Are we voting early, or did we go to a voting poll place, or how is that? There's information, but not enough information about it.
You vote how you would normally vote. So you can request your ballot. You can go to the online website for the Virginia Department of Elections. You can request a mailed ballot to mail and return. Do not wait. If it's anywhere close to, the middle of April. Plan to go to your voter registrar's office. You can vote early in person for a 45-day period. You can vote at your normal designated polling location on election day. The polls will be open during the normal hours of 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Everything that you would normally anticipate on any other given election, that is what this special election is going to look like. If you like what you're hearing up here, you want to support some of the work that Bobby Scott is doing, I highly encourage you to vote yes.
And early vote starts on March the 6th.
Yes.
And we want to have a huge turnout on March the 6th. That's the NAACP part that I'm saying that. Say your name.
Yes. Hi, I'm Sandra Winstead, and I'm sorry, Representative Scott, because I've written you so many times. What difference? I've gotten to be jaded now. I've written you and Kane and Warner. I'm not sure what difference it makes. I'm one of those let me write this letter people. But what good is it doing for our cause to write you? Because I'll keep writing. But only if it's doing some good. If it's just aggravating you and you have to,
Well, yeah, letters have an effect. It lets us know what people are thinking. On some issues, I think it's fair to say you would have limited effect if you're trying to get me to give ICE more power and less oversight. Your letter would not be particularly influential. It depends on the issue, but you ought to continually write when you have opinions so that members, your elected officials, have a clue as to what's going on in the community. I would say that people ask how you can communicate with what form of communication has the most effect, whether form letter or handwritten note or all that kind of thing. The form of the communication I found doesn't really have that much effect. It's the content of the communication and who it's coming from. If it's an education issue and it's coming from the dean of education at a local university, it would have more impact than, I don't care what form it takes, from somebody I've never heard of. I would take the dean of education more seriously. But you have to continually communicate. And as I've said, when you communicate in groups, it has much more of an effect. When you have a communication from an organization, it gives the indication that the organization has studied the issue and a lot of people came to the same conclusion. So I would one say keep writing, but also if you can communicate in groups, that's helpful. And if you can, in your communication, indicate your level of expertise in the area, that would help evaluate the communication.
We could take a couple more questions. And let me go to this side and I'll come back over here. Take two over here and one here.
Hi, my name is Dr. Gail Nakula. I'm a faculty member at Old Dominion University, and I was wondering, Congressman Scott, if you could explain why ICE funding cannot be frozen.
It can be. You need a majority vote in the House and the Senate. They have been given in that big ugly bill, they've got massive amounts of money. And that's one of the complications in shutting down the Department of Homeland Security. ICE already has more money than they can spend. And so the agencies that get smacked are the Coast Guard, TSA, FEMA, Secret Service, agencies that most people would frankly want to get funding. Democrats in a position where, you got to do something. And hopefully this will have an impact. But as I said, the Democratic leader of the House, Hakeem Jeffries, has said that we're not going to get in the way of the next paycheck for TSA agents. They've sacrificed enough in the last go round. the procedure would be in the funding bill to amend the spending to claw back money that has already been allocated and not spent and reduce that amount of money. That can easily be done with a simple majority in the House and a filibuster, across a filibuster in the Senate. So it can be done. The problem is you don't have a majority in the House willing to do it. And so we're trying to figure out, to stop the show and be an aggravation, do everything we can, but the ability of a minority in a democracy to affect policy is obviously limited. But there is no reason it can't be done other than you got to have the votes.
I do want to add, there is a movement in the Senate. So Senator Sanders recently had an amendment that would have clawed back about $71 million from ICE's budget to send it back to Medicaid. Now, this is also Senator Sanders like strategically kind of repositioning in the public's mind just how much money has been given to DHS and ICE for this kind of violent behavior out in our communities, but also to remind the public at large that, the services that matter, the services that keep us all safe and healthy and our communities strong are being raided, right? The federal budget is not infinite. 2 Republican senators voted for that, Senator Collins and Senator Murkowski. So that's Alaska and Maine. So to the woman's question earlier, does it matter to write? Now, we have excellent representation here in Virginia, a lot of fantastic, we have wonderful senators, we have representatives like Congressman Scott. But if you have a network, and this is the power of being part of a group, if you're part of groups, professional organizations, larger networks, friends, family, relatives, in those other key districts, in those other key states, expressing displeasure and the volume of correspondence, the heightened, we don't want masked men knocking on our doors at night. That kind of sentiment in certain sections of the country can move the needle, right? That can move the votes in Congress. It is frustrating in this moment, but all is not lost. More movement to talk about the things that matter to all of us in our communities: healthcare, housing, safety, education, jobs. Those are all important things that are not going to disappear. And spending the money in this way, the longer we keep up that activity, the more we can show that this is not how we want our taxpayers, money to be spent. So there's hope out there.
Hi, my name is Rafael Leonardo. I work with Thrive Peninsula. We serve around 200 Hispanic families. So I wanted to ask, what signage policies and protocols for volunteers should organizations like Thrive post to create, communicate our legal boundaries and prevent immigration officers to entering non-public areas without proper authorization? We also have, we collect private information from them. So how can we prevent from them to get to that into our clients when we serve it with dignity?
Yes, could you ask the question? Ask the question again.
So pretty much the question is, what kind of safeguards we can implement to prevent ICE to coming into our food pantry while we serve in our Hispanic community?
That's one of the demands we've made, that they not enforce immigration laws in what they call sensitive locations, schools, places of worship, courthouses, and food pantries. I think would be part of that. People going to a food pantry shouldn't be arrested by ICE agents. That has been the practice. And when you look at these listed demands, it's either what's been going on for decades, where you do what they've always done, or the law, like the Fourth Amendment, get a warrant before you go into somebody's house. To show you what we're dealing with, according to published reports, the administration response to get a warrant before you go into someone's house, like the Fourth Amendment requires, was, quote, the Fourth Amendment is a non-starter.
So I would also like to add to that, Congressman, if I could. I think, you know, we have seen lots of small businesses and other nonprofits go ahead and post signs immediately letting folks know that this is a protected space, this is private property, you will need a judicial warrant to enter. But I would also say as a nonprofit, there has been lots of trainings out there on what you can actually do with your data. That would also start reviewing your bylaws, making sure that you have policies in place to go ahead and protect your bylaws, your data, your information, and also trying to consult with a nonprofit attorney to making sure that you're in compliance with your nonprofit 501c3 status. But putting all of that in place and making sure that you're able to go ahead and do that. I will say I've also seen some other organizations pass new bylaws that automatically they delete a certain amount of data to make sure that they are able to go ahead and do that lawfully and have that data protected. Other folks have decided to no longer have their information on a cloud, they download it. So I think that is something that you'll have to go back and speak with your organization, your board, and find out what best works for you, and also consult a nonprofit attorney that can help you with that.
I can add one more piece. If you could also have people ask speak to their employers and find out what the policy is for the individual businesses. So if somebody is at work and ICE or any officer shows up, they cannot enter private or sensitive spaces within the business. So let's say I work at Panera Bread. If somebody comes in and I'm concerned about my safety, I could go back to where the dishwasher is. I could go back to where the cooks are because that is a non-public area. The only way that ICE or an officer can come to me is if there is a warrant or if my employer, if the business grants their permission. So having a plan, we've talked about having a family plan, but also having a plan while people are at work or with their organizations would also be helpful, and just kind of know like what is the policy where you work. So that way, if somebody comes in, the employees or the members can know where are we going to go for safety.
We have some place, but they just keep changing. So I just wanted to know if I have a question also about Project Homecoming, because we also have a lot of the Hispanic families. They deportating the breadwinner, right? And then the families staying behind with no resources, no money. And I'm trying to find valuable options that I can offer to them. And I stumble upon Project Homecoming, which is the self-deportation, but I don't even know if there's any legal advice that could be, are there any legal resources for them that can make an educated decision if they decided to go that route to reunite with their loved ones?
So
Go ahead.
I would say every case is different, and that is a very personal decision. And it depends if the individuals who are left behind, and we've seen either or spouse left behind before. Sometimes it's the mother who's deported, sometimes it's the father. But it's a very difficult and challenging place to be. And that individual, I would suggest, you know, they have to go ahead and find the good fit for them to help them make that decision, whether that's a faith leader, whether that's a community partner, whether that's a legal service provider. That's a very personal decision to make. And they'd have to weigh the pros and cons of what the risk and benefits are. And that is something that I would say that unfortunately, I don't know at this moment any kind of organization that solely does that. But I think there are many organizations, community organizations that are willing to sit down and also kind of walk that through, that are also the ones who are able to go ahead and try to hope and put the paperwork together. And we've seen instances where both parents are deported and only the child is still here. And that child is sometimes granted to a new guardian. We've seen that particularly with faith leaders step up to that plate. So it's a very challenging and personal decision. And unfortunately, that is something that they will have to kind of weigh how they best make that decision themselves.
We have one last question.
My name is Mary Scott Nakeeb, and I want to say I have to thank God and I love the United States, and I will say that we're great people. I want to tell you that that is a situation. There was a gentleman that's, I think I'm working with at least 4 of them that were deported, and their wives were left and the children were left. The problem, well, now that I know, I did get services for them, but I got it through the church. One, the other one was United Way, social services, but I had a problem with 2 of them. Most of the people of the Spanish background usually are very family orientated. So it's the man whose name is on the lease. What happened? And I called Congressman Scott's office, and that's how I got here today. They told me where you were. And I wanted you to know this. Because Mary won't stop until, somebody kills me or something. But you must spread the word that the male and the female must be on the legal contract of the home and family. Social services, nor will United Way will not pay the rent for the lady. So there is a mother who can't pay the rent of the home they lived in. And secondly, the children, because she nor her or the husband are citizens. So we have to have other programs to feed them, because social services will not give them Medicaid or food because they're not citizens. So I would like to know, in your great meetings or whatever, to at least make it that if the gentleman, the ladies, and the children are left behind to starve and to be mistreated after they take the man. If they're going to take the man because there's illegal, they might as well take the whole family back. But they're not doing that. So I would like for you all to come up with an idea of how to protect the women and the children so they at least can have a roof over their head and food on their stomach.
Well, you mentioned not citizens. If people are here with documentation, many of them are in fact entitled to benefits. So depending on what their technical status is, if they're here clearly without any documentation at all, then frankly, it's going to be difficult. And there are, just for humanity purposes, at least some short-term relief for it to be available. But if people are not here with with any documentation, and you've got this administration running around profiling people, it's going to be difficult to do much, other than if they're going to be apprehended, it'd be done in a humane way. If they're going to go to a detention center, they'd be held in humane conditions. And if they'd be deported back to the country of origin, not some random country that just to inflict pain and anguish. There's a report today that people are being deported, what they call third country deportation, where you're being deported to a country you don't know anything about, don't even speak the language, and this administration doesn't care. And that's what we're dealing with. They've made it clear that they don't want people immigrating from certain countries. They have names for those kinds of countries, disparaging names. And so they're going after them with a vengeance. And if they can find that you're not here you're here without proper documentation, it's going to be a problem. Now, when you have people that are in fact here that are in desperate situations, there are a lot of agencies will do what they can, at least on a short-term situation. And we don't want, I don't care what your status is, I don't want to live in a country where people are starving. You know, you ought to have some kind of response. And most of our social service agencies do not ask for verification of citizenship and all that. They find somebody in need, they tend to them. Now, what government agencies do, we're legally obligated. I mean, if you don't have proper status, you're prevented from getting Medicaid. And that's because you can't get the votes to pass Medicaid if you don't do that. But you pointed out that there's some just don't care. For short term, we need to have a response. But if people are not here with proper documentation, it's going to be a problem. You are suggesting that ICE operate in a humane fashion. And we haven't changed the laws. It's just ICE has operated in a humane fashion for decades and years. I mean, it's never operated this way. This administration has decided that it doesn't care. It doesn't want immigrants in the country, and it's going to do everything it can, mean-spirited or not, to get them out. And that's what we're dealing with. And the response has got to be that you got to vote. This should not come as a surprise. Project 2025 told everybody what he was going to do, and he's doing it. And so we got outvoted. Well, if you have immigration lawyers, the problem is going to be that when you ultimately get a decision, if you're not here with proper documentation, then you'll be deported. And the question is whether or not you had due process and whether you're treated humanely. But if you're not here with proper document, now, it hasn't been enforced with the intensity that it's being enforced now. People are here minding their own business, working, paying taxes. We haven't had this kind of hate-filled intensity that we've got today. But technically, that's been the law. We haven't changed the law. And so
afterwards,
you got to change the people in charge.
So you'll have time. Everyone will have time to talk to any of the panelists afterwards. You know, we just want for time's sake. That's fine. Thank you, Congressman Scott.
Well, I want to thank people for coming out. This has been a very productive discussion. I want to thank our panelists for their expertise and giving us the information we need to how to deal with the situation. It is unprecedented, but until we change the people in power, it's what we're going to have to be dealing with. So thank you for coming out. This won't be the last time we get together. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. Discussion. From this point,
Yeah. Tell me about the group leader just having. So, we're gonna kind of work around that.
Yeah. No, let me give you
What
my
year
card.
are you?
I think it was.
Are you registered to vote? That's your constitutionally protected right.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming. So we're going to be opening up the polling location on your campus April the 21st. So you'll see me out on campus. No, that is election day. That's gonna be like the inaugural grand opening of the polling location on your campus.
Absolutely. So
Thank you.
I'm the chair of the election board. Yeah, so like I oversee that office, and when you vote anywhere in the city of Hampton, I'm on the board that oversees that. So yeah, I've been directly involved in getting that polling location open, yeah.
thank you. I appreciate your team. Thank you.
We're actually gonna be on your campus, getting people registered or signed up to be officers of election. We actually need people to work this new polling location at the HU Convocation Center. I'll give you my direct information, but I'm also going to tell you how to apply.
That just sleep through it, don't care. So we gotta change them all. If we can get members of the House to ask questions and expose these people for the mean-spirited, vicious people they are, then maybe they'll slow down.
Well, I've got some families and I'll definitely do it.
So the best thing you can do is have people create powers of attorney, because while the problems that you're speaking to are very specific to what the laws require, and it just has people stuck in situations, people are not without the ability to do anything. So for example, let's say the husband had like a bank account or something that's only in his name only. The way to get around it is if he had left